Today's reading is from Giambattista Vico, Book 2 of his New Science. This is Section 2, Poetic Logic, Chapter 1, Poetic Logic, Sections 400 to 403. That which is metaphysics, insofar as it contemplates things in all the forms of their being, is logic insofar as it considers things in all the forms by which they may be signified. Accordingly, as poetry has been considered by us above as a poetic metaphysics in which the theological poets imagine bodies to be for the most part divine substances, so now that same poetry is considered as poetic logic, by which it signifies them. Logic comes from logos, whose first and proper meaning was fabula, fable, carried over into Italian as favela, speech. In Greek, the fable was also called mythos, myth, whence comes the Latin mutus, mute. For speech was born in mute times as mental or sign language, in which Strabo, in a golden passage, says existed before vocal or articulate language, whence logos means both word and idea. It was fitting that the matter should be so ordered by divine providence in religious times, for it is an eternal property of religions that they attach more importance to meditation than to speech. Thus the first language in the first mute times of the nations must have begun with signs, whether gestures or physical objects, which had natural relations to the ideas to be expressed. For this reason, logos or word meant also deed to the Hebrews, and thing to the Greeks, as Thomas Gataker observes in his De Instrumenti Stylo. Similarly, mythos came to be defined for us as vera narratio, or true speech, the natural speech which first Plato and then Iamblichus said had been spoken in the world at one time. But this was mere conjecture on their part, and Plato's effort to recover the speech in the Cratylus was therefore vain, and he was criticized for it by Aristotle and Galen. For that first language, spoken by the theological poets, was not a language in accord with the nature of the things it dealt with, as must have been the sacred language invented by Adam, to whom God granted divine onomathesia, the giving of names to things according to the nature of each. But was a fantastic speech making use of physical substances endowed with life and most of them imagined to be divine. This is the way in which the theological poets apprehended Jove, Cybele, or Berecynthia, and Neptune, for example, and, at first mutely pointing, explained them as substances of the sky, the earth, and the sea, which they imagined to be animate divinities, and were therefore true to their senses in believing them to be gods. By means of these three divinities, in accordance with what we have said above concerning poetic characters, they explained everything appertaining to the sky, the earth, and the sea. And similarly, by means of the other divinities, they signified the other kinds of things appertaining to each, denoting all flowers, for instance, by flora, and all fruits by pomona. We nowadays reverse this practice in respect of spiritual things, such as the faculties of the human mind, the passions, virtues, vices, sciences, and arts. For the most part, the ideas we form of them are so many feminine personifications, to which we refer all the causes, properties, and effects that severally appertain to them. For when we wish to give utterances to our understanding of spiritual things, we must seek aid from our imagination to explain them, and, like painters, form human images of them. But these theological poets, unable to make use of the understanding, did the opposite and more sublime thing. They attributed senses and passions, as we saw not long since, to bodies, and to bodies as vast as the sky, sea, and earth. Later, as these vast imaginations shrank and the power of abstraction grew, the personifications were reduced to diminutive signs. Metonymy drew a cloak of learning over the prevailing ignorance of these origins of human institutions, which have remained buried until now. Jove becomes so small and light that he is flown about by an eagle. Neptune rides the waves in a fragile chariot, and Cybele rides seated on a lion. Thus the mythologies, as their name indicates, must have been the proper languages of the fables being imaginative class concepts, as we have shown. The mythologies must have been the allegories corresponding to them. Allegory is defined as diversiloquium, insofar as, by identity not of proportion, but, to speak scholastically, of predictability, allegories signify the diverse species or the diverse individuals comprised under these genera, so that they must have a univocal signification connoting a quality common to all their species and individuals, as Achilles connotes an idea of valor common to all strong men, or Ulysses an idea of prudence common to all wise men, such that these allegories must be the etymologies of the poetic languages, which would make their origins all univocal, whereas those of the vulgar languages are more often analogical. We also have the definition of the word etymology itself as meaning veriloquium, just as fable was defined as vera narratio, true narration.